Okay. So I have known Usha for a really, really long time. We go back 16 to 20 years back, I think, when Usha was living in US itself. And we met through our local Kannada Sangha at the time, through Triveni. And I think having a common interests in social service and volunteering and all, it just really brought us together. And from then on, it's been such an immense pleasure and honor to see where Usha has taken all her interests and the depth to which she has gone. It's just amazing. So let me give a quick introduction about Usha. She's the founder. So Usha is Dr. Usha Vastare. She's the founder of Yoga Kshema Rehabilitation and Wellness Center. She has been a resident of somebody speaking. Okay, she's been a resident of US for several decades, but now I think she is more in India than in US, and she keeps moving. As she says, now she's a world traveler. She's from nowhere and everywhere. So she's joining us today from US itself. She's just now recently come back to the US for a visit to give all these wonderful talks. And so that's where she is. I think today she's in New Jersey, if I'm correct, right? And so she started her studies in Bangalore and in Mysore. That's where she was trained. She was a faculty of Temple University School of Medicine for over 17 years. Then she was a clinical research project coordinator at the Center for Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders at Pennsylvania Hospital. She has always been an ardent devotee of Ramakrishna Ashram, and now she uses that to devote her time entirely for service activities, both in India and abroad. Educating people about the workings of the mind through a combination of recent neuroscientific research, understanding, and scriptural knowledge. Usha conducts a lot of workshops, service group meetings for various sections of the society, from homeowners to survivors of chronic illnesses and caregivers. I think that's how when she started Yoga Kshema, it was to address the caregivers of chronic illness. So I remember all the work that she was doing initially towards that too. And I think she continues to do all of that now. But her workshops now are based on the most recent advances in neuroscientific research and are geared to the participants in improving their quality of life. Her programs are broadcast on TV and on radio in several countries. And her objective is to introduce positive psychology, which we think we all need a lot, practical and scientific methods to lead a holistic living. This includes guidance on stress management, building resilience, mindful leadership, cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness and mindful living, palliative care, and healthy living style. She aims to bring the confluence of science and ancient wisdom in her talks and workshops. Her target audiences come from all walks of life. So regarding today's presentation, we expect it to be an hour and a half, and it'll be quite informal. And if you have any questions during the talk, post your questions in the chat window, which I will monitor, so that we give Usha the time to go through her thoughts, and at the appropriate time, I might just pause her to ask some specific questions. But Usha, again, if you want to make it interactive at any time, please do so how you would like. And with that, I hand it over to you. Thank you so much for doing this, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ramaa. And I see and recognize many, at least a few names here, going back to a couple of decades. So it's always nice to come back to our old friendship time and days. With that, let me start sharing the screen. But as I do that, as you rightly said, Ramaa, anybody, you can actually stop me and ask me questions. You can raise your hand, or as Ramaa said, put the question in the chat box. I always say, if we have any doubts, it would be really tough to go forward. So anytime you may stop and ask questions, I'll take a call whether to answer it right away or if it can wait. Okay. This is by Marcel Proust, and one of my favorite phrases, you may say. We usually focus on the destination, but how about the journey? As the saying goes, journey sometimes is more important than the destination. Or we need to make journey itself as destination. And then if we ask a question, is journey important? Is destination important? Or is it something else that is important? Let us think about that the next couple of days. And I'm sure all of us have many different answers to that. And we will hopefully end with this quote after 2 days. Who does not like a story, right? So I'm going to start today's interaction and presentation through this story. I'm sure you would have heard about this, a Zen story, a story about a Zen monk and a stranger who wants to become student of this Zen monk. He travels far and then comes to see this Zen monk. And as is tradition in Japan, the master serves tea to the stranger. And as you know the story already, he keeps pouring the tea even after that cup is full, so that the student asks, Master, don't you see? The cup is over full and no more can go into the cup. And that is when the Zen master stops and says, yes, your mind is also full of something, Until and unless you empty it, I won't be able to fill in. But don't take me wrong, this is a story. Story is a story. It has limited application. Neither am I a Zen master, nor are you seeking something as a student, none of it. But the essence of the story is, as Uma was telling before, mindfulness is such a hot topic, and especially in West. This is such a hot topic, and each one of us, we are trying to be mindful in our own ways. So be it. And all I request you is empty your teacup just a little bit so that I get an opportunity to value add to whatever you know. And hopefully I'll be able to bring a couple of different angles that we may not have thought about, This is directly with respect to implementation purposes. So coming back, no need to empty your teacup, but just enough so that I'll be able to fill it in at least a bit. With that, let's ask ourselves, why are we here? Either you can write your answers in the chat box, or you can unmute and answer yourself. I'll just wait for a minute or so. Do you have any expectations from this? Are you looking for something specific? If I know about it, then I can actually weave in during the presentation, and otherwise we will see where we can take this from. Maybe we can wait for a couple of minutes, Ramaa, and then if there is anything in the chat box, you can let me know.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll let you know.
Sure. Because sometimes we, especially here in West, we are all using mindfulness techniques or mindful breathing on a regular basis, having something in our minds, right? If you have something specific, or if you're using the mindfulness techniques for something already, please do share with us so that it might help us to take it further.
So we have one response here, Usha. Uma wants to know some general concepts of mindfulness and how I can practice it on my own. I struggle with this.
I'm sure you will be able to get some tips, Uma. And not only that, if you are interested, through Yogakshema, we have cut some studio quality recordings of guided mindfulness techniques with a short scientific introduction and also conclusion as to how such techniques, various different techniques might help. So we can also share with you all such links later on. Thanks, Uma.
One more, I think this is Jaya from New Jersey. I'm here to learn to train my mind to stay focused on positivity, especially when there is so much negativity around it.
Absolutely. I'm sure you will find something, hopefully, that either you may not know some of it already, or even if you know something, it's always good to hear it again and again and to make that intellectual understanding deeper. Yes, you will definitely be able to get something, Jay. Okay.
I think that's
that is it. Yeah. Let us just move on and say, if I have to ask this question and answer it myself, let us see, what are some of the common challenges? I say common because this is going to be a scientific presentation with scientific solutions too, right? So the problems many times are also common, and the solutions will also be common, as we know, if it is scientific. Science is all about commonality and reproducibility. So what are some of the challenges that we are all going through? We might say, I'm already happy, but I want to be happier, even under these circumstances. Or it could be, I have a tough time to balance my personal life and my career. This is where I would like to harmonize. Or all of us as parents, we want to make sure that our kids are going to be better off than us. Definitely, we all want to improve our interpersonal relationships, right? Because I always say, either as important as health, but I go a step further and say it's even more important than our health is our interpersonal relationships. So how can we improve our interpersonal relationships? And we want to find more time to do things what we like and want. Only somebody like Ramaa will always find time for her passion. But many of us are struggling, to find more and more time to do the things that we really like to do and that we want to do. And who doesn't want to be less stressful, right? So these are some of the common challenges that we are all going through. And how do we usually commonly figure out the solution for these common challenges? If we want to be happier, then we say, when things are going our way, not just if, when things are going our way, of course we are happier. And as long as things are under our control, then we can balance out and harmonize our personal life and our professional life. And as long as the kids are at the right school, right college, right career, right partner, then we know our kids are better off than us, right? And how do we improve our interpersonal relationships? We always wish for, if only I had more supporting colleagues, more supporting friends, and more supporting spouse, or even the kids, then we know our interpersonal relationships will be improved. And then again, if we have to find more time to do the things that we want, how do we figure out that if only solution always comes about, right? If only I can figure out a way to find time to do things that I like and enjoy, then I'm going to be okay. And to be less stressful, we always say, if I had more or better help, like with our maid, with our assistant, with our spouse, or with our working conditions, we know we're going to be less stressed out. But in general, we are trying to figure out solution ultimately to enjoy life to the fullest extent, to have zest for life in spite of the present conditions, not just in US, all over the world. In spite of all of this, can we still have zest for life? Enjoying life is one thing, and going beyond enjoying life to have zest for life is another. Let us look for it. What do I mean by that? And in a few minutes, we will get to that. So these are the possible solutions that we find. So again, if I have to say, why are we here? It is for us to understand our own mind, our own brain, how our brain would work, and how our own mind would work under different circumstances, and to be able to train our mind, and not just to change somebody else's behavior. It could be our colleagues, it could be our spouse, it could be our kids, or to change the external circumstances. Rather than that, we are here to understand our own mind and to train our own mind irrespective of the external circumstances. So for today and the next 2 days, this is the flow. This is how the flow is going to be. I'm going to start with a short introduction, which you will see. And then even before we get to understand and know about mindfulness, we're going to know what is it that prevents us to be mindful. And to understand deeply what is it that prevents us to be mindful, we need to go deeper into understanding our own brain and our own mind. And I always say, if we understand one mind, one brain, which is ours, then we will be able to understand everybody else's. And that what is mindfulness? How can we use mindfulness or the techniques of mindfulness to train our mind? How can we use this as a tool? Is it just using it as a tool, or can we go beyond using this as a tool? This is where Yogakshema has come into play, wherein we started using mindfulness as a tool. We would introduce mindfulness as a tool. We would introduce mindfulness as a rewiring tool of the brain. From that, we have moved to understanding and using this mindfulness as a way of life. So from a tool to a way of life, what does that mean? How do we do that? Is what we're going to know and learn together in the next 2 days. And what are the tangible measures of our following this mindfulness techniques? Are we doing this properly? I've been doing for quite some time, but yet not me, but my friends or my kids say, I know you've been being mindful, you've been doing mindfulness breathing techniques, but you still lose your cool. This is what many people hear this comment from their loved ones. So we need to know the tangible measures of whether we are following this mindfulness techniques in a proper way or not. So these are some of the things we're going to know about it in the next couple of days, and some simple practices of mindfulness techniques. And then we will try and see how from a tool we can make this as a way of life. So this is how our flow is going to be. So just have to tell you, first and foremost, whatever I'm going to be speaking is based on the recent advances in neuroscience research, both in this country and Europe, and more so what we have done in Yogakshema in an informal way until now, except just recently before coming here, we are trying to utilize all these neuroscience concepts in a deeper manner, taking it to a therapeutic level. So if the time permits, I'll share that later on, or else during Q&A, we can look into that. So how are we going to look at this introduction in a few different steps? First, I'll go over with the challenge that the present Dalai Lama posed to the Western neuroscientists, and a lot of the new research happened because of Dalai Lama's challenge, and many of the positive psychology precepts. And even though there are many positive psychology precepts, which is the one that is very dear to my heart, and which is the one, if we know one and follow one precept, everything else will fall in place. We will look into that. And a famous positive psychology course that Tal Ben-Shahar introduced in Harvard University. I'm sure you would know this, but this is just a trivial question, information, but it's very interesting. So I put that in. And research of N of 1 on myself, whatever I have done so far for the past many years, and especially the past 15 years. And with this cross-cultural experience of Western experience for several decades, combined with the Indian cultural experience, how I have taken this at a personal level and also at a professional level. We will touch upon it as we go along. So first, Dalai Lama's challenge to Western neuroscientists. Dalai Lama just posed a simple question to the neuroscientists, saying that how can you change your life? Of course, for anybody, and especially Americans, even if they are scientists, it doesn't matter. The first thing for all of us, what comes to our mind to change our life, all of us want the easy way out, right? So we start thinking about changing the hair color, or changing our hairstyle, or changing our wardrobe, sometimes changing our car, or even the house. These are quick ways. I'm not saying these won't help. Definitely all of these will help us to change our lives. Of course, this is how we start thinking about, and rightly so. But Dalai Lama said, all of this is fine. But I'm going to say, if you really change your mind, you can actually change your life itself. What he meant by changing his mind, actually, if you change your brain, you will be able to change your life, is what he said. And the scientist said, changing our brain? How can that change our life? Yes, from a pathological perspective, yes. But how can that happen when we are trying to change our life, to improve our quality of life, for betterment of life? What are you saying is what they posed the question back to Dalai Lama. And at that time, he said, actually, if you really change your mind, that is how you can actually change your brain. And that is what will result in changing your life. When he posed this question few decades back, none of the scientists here believed in what Dalai Lama said. At that time, we all believed if something happened to the brain itself, we know how the mind changes to having either certain mental illnesses, certain diseases, or our mental health is affected. If something happened to the brain, if there were changes in the brain, that is how the Western neuroscientists were looking at that issue. So they posed that question again. I don't think that can happen, because we believed at that time, after a certain age, the brain will not be able to change. Was the now it is an outdated issue. It seems like it, but not at that time. Most of us learned in our schools just the way all these scientists said. So at that time, Dalai Lama posed another question saying that, why don't you, using the state-of-the-art technology, do some experiments and then see whatever I'm saying is true or not. If what I am saying is not true, then I will go and change the Buddhist texts. And we know the Buddhist texts came as an offshoot of Hindu scriptures, offshoot of Hindu Upanishad scriptures. Let that be a separate issue altogether. But he said, if I am right, then you need to go change your scientific books. And many of the scientists took this as a challenge, and the rest is history. Even though this is just a few decades back, at that time, Dalai Lama was able to send many of the Buddhist monks, like the ones that you see here. He's actually a French microbiologist by the name of Matthew Ricard, who turned into a Buddhist monk, and then he's living in Tibet. He even he learned Pali, and he translates many of Dalai Lama's talks and books and whatnot. Just like him, Dalai Lama's sent many of the Buddhist monks with as few as 5,000 hours of meditative experience, up to 25,000 hours of meditative experience. And the brains of such Buddhist monks were scanned using not the regular MRI, but the fMRI, the ones that are used in research. fMRI studies, PET scans, SPECT scans were done on many of the brains of these Buddhist monks. In other words, the meditative brains were scanned, and they were compared with the non-meditative brains of control group of people. And just like what Dalai Lama had said, there were clear-cut differences in the very structure of the brains of meditative Buddhist monks when compared to non-meditative control groups of people. So in other words, when we say changing mind is nothing but training our mind through whichever meditative technique for that matter, and not just through meditative techniques, and there are many other techniques, which is what Yogakshema, the organization that I belong to, is going much deeper into understanding various different ways of changing our mind to be able to change the very structure and function of the brain, and to be able to change our lives. All of this is represented in this slide. In other words, what do I mean by changing our mind? Mind is nothing but it's made up of our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings, our belief system, our perception, our memories, right? So changing our mind, not in a flippant way, but in a highly structured, organized, effortful, willful ways, if we change our minds, now there is ample scientific evidence to show that there is change in the structure and function of the brain. This is one aspect that we need to know and to understand at a deeper manner. Just changing mind and changing the structure of the brain is not going to have a permanent effect. It will have some lasting effects. However, if we need to have long-lasting effects on the structure and function of the brain such that our life itself changes, then all these changes in our minds, in an effortful, willful, structured manner, when we change our mind, it has to result in the change in our actions, change in our habits, change in our behavior, change in our experience. Only when we change our minds will it result in change in our experience, then only long-lasting changes in the structure of the brain, and so does in our life, can happen. So just having or changing from negative thoughts to positive thoughts are not enough. We have done that many a times, all the time, to keep going back to our original ways. So just changing our negative thoughts to positive thoughts are not going to be enough. Just changing our negative emotions and negative feelings are not going to be enough to positive feelings. But both these positive thoughts and positive feelings need to result in positive actions, positive behavior, positive experience, positive habits. Then only will there be changes in the structure of the brain so as to result in the change in our lives. This entire change in the structure and function of the brain is what is technically termed as neuroplasticity. And I purposely put that self-directed neuroplasticity because many a times we change our thoughts and feelings just because somebody asks us to. Whether we are convinced or not, we will quickly, flippantly will be able to change our negative thoughts into positive thoughts because somebody has told us, no, this is negative, it is not good for your health. So we just change it flippantly. But understanding the why is so important. Then how becomes easy, as I always say. So understanding the why behind it and to be able to increase our own self-awareness, to be able to track our own negative thoughts, our own negative feelings, our own negative actions towards our thoughts and feelings, and to be able to change for ourselves is what makes it really empowering. And that entire process is called neuroplasticity. And by the way, when we do this for ourselves, I'll try to bring this up in the next couple of days. This is also what we call this in Yogakshema as being neurosculptors of our own lives. Then we can become neurosculptors, we will take that up hopefully a deeper little later. But if I have to just again say this very briefly, you change your mind, you change your brain. Change your thoughts, change your emotions, and change your brain. Change your perception, you change your brain. Change your attitude, and you change your brain. Change your belief system, change your brain. You change your personality, you change your brain. And this changing is what we call, again, technically termed as rewiring. We will definitely go a little bit deeper into this. What does hardwiring mean? And what does rewiring mean? Probably tomorrow we will go into that. So what all I have talked about, I'm just going to show a very short animated video, and then we will be able to understand this process of neuroplasticity in a beautiful way through an animated video. Here it goes.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Yeah. Before I go further into a couple more aspects of introduction, this is so important about understanding neuroplasticity. If you have any questions, we may take a few questions, Rama, here for the next few minutes before I go further, or we can go further and then whatever depends on the audience. If they have any doubts, specific doubts, I'll take it up. If we don't have any doubts, then I'll continue. Okay.
There are no questions.
Good.
Usha. So,
Very good. Yeah, we will go to the next aspect of introduction, which is positive psychology. As you probably already know, these two, Martin Seligman and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, they are the fathers of positive psychology. And to make it really, really short, until recently, until year 2000, psychology was looking at things what did not work either at the level of the brain or at the level of the mind, actually. But Martin Seligman, in the year 2000, when he was the president of American Psychological Association or Psychiatric Association, one of the two, APA, he introduced positive psychology, saying that we need to have the knowledge of what makes our life worth living, rather than focusing on the research about what did not work. So until 2000, if you actually look at the statistics in the research that was done in psychology, until year 2000, you will see the ratio of 200 to 1, 200, everything working, what did not work properly. Either so much research on depression, on anger, on anxiety, all research pertaining to that. But now that balance has changed, and thanks to both Martin Seligman and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, one of the main aspects, if I just have to talk about positive psychology, other than their PARMA model of developing positive emotions and then leading a life of an engaged life and whatnot, for me, the most important and the major contribution of positive psychology is this meaning and purpose of life. I always, even now, many a times, whenever I speak about this in India, the first thing for people that comes to my mind, oh, she has switched to philosophy whenever I bring in meaning and purpose. And rightly so, they think like that, because whenever anybody raised the question of meaning and purpose of life, that was only from a philosophical angle. But now we can safely and gladly say, as a scientist, I'm so happy to bring this up, because we can gladly say, whenever we are bringing out the subject of meaning and purpose of life, we are talking in a scientific manner, not from a philosophical perspective. In my opinion, this is the major contribution of positive psychology. I mean, this is where the confluence of both neuroscience and spirituality, and especially in the Hindu scriptures, especially in the Buddhist scriptures, especially in the Hindu scriptures, when we look into the Advaita philosophy and figuring out this positive psychology precepts, they really come very close up to a certain point. There's hardly any difference between the two. So this is where my personal interest and passion comes about, in this positive psychology, figuring out the meaning and purpose of life. I'm just going to say that I'm not getting into PARMA model, because all of that, we can so easily get things on the internet. What are the things that we usually may not be able to so easily find is what I'm trying to bring in together, connect the dots, and then bring a comprehensive perspective of mindful living and the effects of mindfulness techniques or mindfulness meditation, rather than going very specifically into, with this type of mindfulness meditation, what are the changes that happen in the brain, which part of the brain gets activated more and which part gets inactivated. all such information, I would say, is of academic interest, and that can be easily obtained on the internet. So I'm trying to get at a meta level, and also to try and see how we can implement all that data that has been produced through all these research so far. How can we implement that into our daily lives? What does that mean when we read a paper and see the medial cortex, prefrontal cortex got activated a whole lot more in this meditative group when compared to the control group? What does that mean to us? That is where my interest is, and we will go deeper into that in the next couple of days. And coming to Tal Ben-Shahar very quickly, he's an American-Israeli professor and a lecturer at Harvard. When he started giving positive psychology courses, the first time when he offered this course, there were students less than 5 in number, 3 or 4. The second turn, maybe a couple more, a few more, that's all. By the third time or so, when he offered the course on positive psychology, he couldn't hold this course in the classroom. He had to hold this positive psychology course in the football field. Even to date, it is one of the most popular courses that Harvard University has offered, and 1,400 students at one time offered this course. Just a little bit trivia, that's all. And what does this mean, research of N of 1? I'll just say this very briefly, how I have practiced this mindfulness meditation from whatever, a few minutes to maybe an hour, to many hours in a day, to how you can convert that rather than just either sitting or walking meditation into actually looking at mindfulness as a way of life. And not only that, using mindful therapy, we have formed a course or a workshop, which is one of the signature workshops of Yogakshema, wherein we talk about the importance of forgiveness, how one can rewire one's own brain through forgiving, through self-directed neuroplasticity efforts using mindfulness therapy. And not only that, how can we improve our interpersonal relationships? And lately, just a couple of months before I left India on my tour, we actually introduced, this is one of the rewiring tools, both mindfulness and to lead a life full of zest, using mindfulness as a tool and a way of life. We have introduced this as a treatment, a non-pharmacological treatment to rewire our brains through self-directed neuroplasticity, how we can actually change the imbalance of the chemicals that happens in the brain, either during anxiety, bipolar, or people with depression. And I will take up questions much later, because this is may not be of everybody's interest, but I'm just going to put that on hold. This is what I mean by research of N of 1. We are able to bring this up. So Dalai Lama's challenge to Western neuroscientists, saying change your mind so that you can change your brain to change your life. And Martin Seligman and Sid and Mihai's contribution. They're the fathers of positive psychology, figuring out the meaning and purpose of our lives. This is the most important aspect of positive psychology. And some trivia about Tal Ben-Shar's course in positive psychology at Harvard University, and how getting into mindfulness and starting with meditation and later looking deeper into mindfulness itself, it became a calling for me. So I moved back to India and then took this as my own passion, looking and going deeper in a highly structured way as a scientist. And then this has led into newer research ideas, and we have already started implementing this both at an individual level and also at a group level. So if we need to change our life, we need to change our very structure and function of the brain. And that can happen by changing our mind in a specific way, changing our mind not in a flippant manner, like how we switch from drinking hot tea to iced tea during summertime, not changing our mind in a flippant manner like that, but in a highly structured, effortful, willful manner over a period of time, changing our mind, leading to changes in our actions, our behavior, our habits, our experience can definitely change our life. So again, we are here to understand and train our mind irrespective of the external circumstances. So about this, how do we change our mind? How do we train our mind? Through mindfulness, right? And why? First of all, why should we train our minds? And then when I give mind training talks, I've taken any of these topics because depending on the group, each one is a separate workshop in itself or a separate talk. We all try and do mind training either for any one of these or for all reasons, either to improve our memory and concentration. And we want to be even more successful than what we are right now, where we are, to definitely improve our own health and well-being, to improve our relationships, as I mentioned earlier, to be happier, and definitely to alleviate the suffering. When I use the word suffering, I'm using it in a scientific manner, because if we just look at it in a regular English word, English parlance manner, none of us are suffering. We have everything what we want and more. So not in that way. Any little kirikiri, as I say, we have in our mind, any little disturbance, any restlessness, and whatever that leads to not utilizing our potential to the fullest extent, may can also lead to suffering. So I'm using the word suffering in a much broader scientific manner. And also, more importantly, to realize our own innate potential. Each one of us have. We have such immense potential. Are we utilizing our potential to the fullest extent? Are we realizing our own potential to the fullest extent? This is one of the hottest topics to be or theme rather, to be training our mind to be able to realize our own potential, irrespective of what age, what socio-economic, educational background we come from. So mind training, as soon as we hear that word mind training, what first comes to our mind? We usually use our willpower when we sit for meditation or for mindful breathing. That takes a lot of willpower. Absolutely true. We need to begin with using the willpower. But even science knows, and everybody will know, that just using our willpower to do things, being stoic, is not going to be enough. Sometime or other, the willpower we will give in to that willpower. It is impossible to utilize doing something only by using willpower. This is where the knowledge part comes in. With the mind training, many a times we don't even think about it. We keep focusing on our willpower. Whenever we want to change our unwanted habit, or whenever we want to form new habits, we are only focusing on our willpower, may not be as much as knowledge. But I would like to make a case in the next 2 days that if we have that depth of knowledge, and if we are intellectually convinced and beyond any doubt, then willpower will ensue. Then using willpower to do anything becomes much, much easier. But for that to happen, our why do we want to train our mind should be really, really deep and strong enough. If our why is not strong enough, no matter how easy the how, quote unquote, how is, if the why is weak, we will not be able to train our mind, change our lives. So before we do anything, make sure your why is really, really strong enough. So if I have to just introduce just in a minute or so and relate to this willpower and knowledge to our signature concept of Yogakshema about being in the survival mode to evolve mode, when we just keep trying to use our willpower for anything and everything in a broad general manner, we might be successful, we might be thriving, yet we might still be in the quote unquote survival mode. Only when that right knowledge comes in, and together with that, if we have a higher purpose in life, not just figuring out the meaning and purpose of life, because the meaning and purpose of life will change from one stage to another in the same person, and will change from one person to another. And if we keep going and asking why for the meaning and purpose of life, as they say, when we ask the why 5 times, most of us will have a common answer, which is that higher purpose of life. When the knowledge and that higher purpose of life is combined, that is when we can be evolving. This is one of the signature concepts of Yogakshema. So just to sum up just the introduction, we know that whatever I'm going to be sharing is all based on recent advances in neuroscience research. And if we need to change our life to improve our quality of mind through improving quality of mind, is by changing our mind, training our mind, so that it results in permanent changes in the structure and function of the brain. And all of this we need to do. What does that improving quality of life means? So that we can enjoy the life to the fullest extent, so that we can have zest for life. And this is how we can actually improve the quality of life. Before I go any further, I think this would be a good time to stop and see if people have any questions with just the introduction itself, because the next half hour or so, I would like to focus on what prevents us to be mindful. So before that, if anybody has any questions, this is a good time to ask.
Usha, I don't know if this is a question or more something
Sure.
that I was thinking as you were talking about. Science tends to break things into pieces to understand whatever the problem is or whatever is behind. But religion and spirituality tries to put things together to understand, right? In having both the Western knowledge of science and the Eastern upbringing, how has it helped you in this journey? Maybe that is you can answer this in parts as we go along in the next couple of days. But I just wanted to just stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, a good one personally for me, Rama. I'll just say just a couple of things briefly now, and then we will take it as we go along. For me personally, being a scientist really helped, Rama, much more than before. So what I'm trying to do is to understand our scriptural knowledge through a scientific angle, and also understand science, the importance of the science itself, and how and when to use the rational ways from the scriptural perspective. So I'm trying to take the science from the scriptural angle, understand scriptures from the scientific angle. That has helped me a lot. And not just me, whenever I discuss these things with many of the sadhus of Ramakrishna order, very high ranking sadhus, great scholars, this is what both of us enjoy when we combine the two together. And all of us, not just scientists, and even the sadhus of any order for that matter, including the Buddhist monks, we see that tackling anything for that matter, just from one angle, we are losing out a lot on that. That's why we see there is so much of confluence of spiritual angle brought into the positive psychology angle that has truly given me almost like an open ticket for me to introduce some of the scriptural knowledge only when the audience wants it, not otherwise, and to bring in any time when they need, because there is so much of a not just parallelism and a confluence. I always say we can actually use many of the scientific tools and scientific understanding of our mind, rather than going into just the traditional yoga sutras, Patanjali yoga and whatnot to train our mind. We can literally use scientific tools up to a very high level, even to be understanding our scriptures. And there is only one tiny gap, between our scientific understanding and that little quantum leap that we need to take to get to that last stage of the scriptural knowledge. For me, scriptural knowledge means that Advaitic, not non-dual understanding. That quantum leap we have to take, one tiny aspect. Even that, it is not much. Even that, when we look at it from a scientific angle, there are many scientists and educators here. I see some of you. We actually believe the first principle, right? The first principle in math or whatever, whenever our science teacher in high school taught us about gravity, we couldn't understand. We believed in it. Because we believed in it, everything else made sense. So in a similar manner, that last stage is what that quantum leap one has to take to understand the real non-dual nature of whatever we want to call that source, or many different names. That's a separate issue. But for me personally, it has helped me a lot. Keeping at it, questioning and questioning until I would get convinced. And just questioning would not be enough. And again, sharing, or I used to say sharing my knowledge, but these days I've come to a stage, it is not even sharing knowledge. All of this brings me so much joy. I'm only sharing my joy rather than this knowledge. So that is how it has helped me, Rama. Thank you. Thanks for that question.
Yeah.
If I may ask, this is Uma Prabhakar.
Yes, ma'am.
So I can see the link between, this, what you said, and the philosophical and the connection between science and, philosophy. From the medical perspective, from allopathic medical perspective, I don't know if you'll cover this later in your talk, but I'm very keen to know how this, this whole process can be applied to overcoming conditions like anxiety and depression and other such neurological conditions that often sort of affect each one of us in different ways, and you don't have to answer it now, Usha, but if you can at least address this at some stage, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, Uma, I had not thought about going deep into any of these medical aspects, but we have done a lot of work with this. This is what I was saying. We actually have coined a term saying that we have a series of talks on YouTube. Yogakshema has a YouTube channel. One of our young volunteers has started a YouTube channel, but that is in Kannada, as a matter of fact. This is a series of talks called Knowledge as Medicine.
Okay.
Nanaushadhi. It's both Kannada and mixed with English, but the presentations are all in English. And this is the newest thing that we have introduced, Knowledge as Medicine series. This is going to be our next research project that we want to take to treat patients in a hospital setting. But so far, what we have done is to treat people with depression, which again, I'm not covering here. That itself is a separate, this is just an, I can just say awareness talk, Uma, for general mindful living. The more and more, if people are interested, Rama and I, we were talking about, we will give you how to keep in touch, whom to contact by the end of the third day. And then we can go as deep as we want. And some of it, this is where I was also saying, somebody like your daughter, so new in this field, and this these newer aspects, even to talk to the patients at an individual basis, if anything can be done, it will be a wonderful way, because even though the depression treatment, we ran, quote unquote, as though as a clinical trial, but nothing like it. But what I'm trying to say is we had selection criteria, and we have collected the data, and then we are following the, not just the patients, we don't want to call it patients, but participants of that depression program, but we have included their families also, because until and unless they are educated, usually the first thing that comes to the family's mind is somebody is either lethargic or lazy, rather than thinking that they are undergoing depression. And so we are going to be following these participants for 1 whole year. Today, I had one support group meeting for the participants. Tomorrow for the family members. This is the 2nd month. And we're going to follow them for 10 more months, and we're collecting the data. And then I'm having a meeting with one of the psychiatrists in Detroit, who is a well-wisher of Yogakshema. and gonna try and see how we can actually make the scientific and the medical community know about this. And if I'm convinced beyond doubt, starting with N of 1, because I also had depression, and I did come out of it, first using medicine, and which did not help after a while, and then I came out of it. All of this has helped. I'm not saying all types of depression can be treated, but with experience, I know there are a subset of people with depression can definitely be helped beyond doubt. And the same way with anxiety. At least only some people go through depression, as you know, Uma. But anxiety, everybody one time or other in their lives will go through anxiety, some type of anxiety or other. This is where we are so interested in spreading this message also. And that is why I've also requested a couple of my friends who are physicians here, those who have joined, to try and see how we can take this forward. And this is where I would also end up later, after the third day, to start off with that. Is the journey important, or is it the destination? And I have a different answer. We will wait until that for the third day. All of this will get tied in, Uma. Thanks. Thanks again for that great question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Ramaa, if you don't have, can I continue?
Sure, Usha. Go ahead.
All right. So now, before going into mindfulness itself, let us see what is it? What is it that prevents us to be mindful? The definition of mindful is very easy. And even to do the mindfulness meditation, we'll say, or the mindfulness breathing technique, we usually say start with 5 minutes. Even that is very easy to do. We all know this, been there, done that, right? But yet to do it in a consistent manner, and yet to see the results, whether we are doing it properly or not, is the question. And that is where something prevents us to be mindful. And let us see what that is. Again, I would like to introduce this through a story. You see here a huge gathering, right? There's a great orator, let's say a sadhu, is giving a discourse. He's a great orator. So everybody is listening and they're enjoying. And this sadhu cuts a joke. And he's so good in even telling jokes. Most of the people get it and they laugh at it. And then after 5 minutes, the sadhu cuts the same joke. And again, the joke was so good, most people laugh at it again. And then after 5 minutes, the sadhu cuts the same joke. And out of the audience, 50% still laugh because it was still good. Out of that 50%, maybe 10% laugh because to give respect. And after 3 minutes, the sadhu cuts the same joke. And there will always be some people who would have missed the first couple of times they heard it. So about 10% of the people laugh at that joke. And after 2 minutes, the sadhu cuts the same joke again. And they start looking at each other. What is happening with this Swamiji? He's saying the same joke again and again. And one person who's sitting in the front says, Swamiji, you're saying the same joke. We cannot laugh at it anymore. And Sadhu says, isn't that so? See, it is so funny. You all agree the joke was so funny. But when it is repeated again and again and again, we fail to laugh at that joke. However, look at this. Years back, somebody has insulted us. Somebody has said something to us, and that is out of a sheer misunderstanding. Many a times that person is dead and gone, but that person is very much alive in our mind. And we keep remembering that again and again and again, and how much we suffer. Isn't this so? Many a times, this is what happens to all of us. And why? Why is this so? Something that is funny, when repeated many a times, we fail to laugh at it. But yet, no matter how much we try, an old misunderstanding, not between strangers, with our own loved ones, that haunts us, comes back again and again and again, and we suffer through that. Let's look at this story again from a scientific perspective. And then, yes, the story is very intense, I know that. But again, science is all about commonality. We don't need to feel bad or feel guilty about any of this. When we do not understand why this happens, this is bound to happen. So when we look at this from a scientific perspective, the explanation, a simple explanation to all of this story is that without any exception, whether somebody is a saint or a scientist, a professor or a student, doctor or a patient, everybody, without any exception, we all have this bias that is innate within us. And rightly so, I won't go into this. This negativity bias has an immense evolutionary biological significance. And this bias is truly what helps us to be in the survival mode. Many a times, this bias is what helps us to be moving along, to be successful, and to be cautious, and not to be with anybody and everybody. It's extremely important concept, that not only just a concept, the thing that we have that is innate within us. But this negativity bias is what exactly prevents us to be evolving into better human beings. I'm just going to define evolving as a better human being. Evolving, we can take from many different angles. We will wait and let it develop as we go along. But this negativity bias is what prevents us to be better human beings. But yet it is important. There is a reason for it. Then how do we tackle this problem? How do we manage this bias? We will look into that. But before that, let us understand this negativity bias, go a little bit deeper and see. Because of this negativity bias, there will be accumulation of many of the negative thoughts within us. In other words, when we have any negative thought or any negative feeling or a negative perception, negative belief system, negative memory, they stick to our mind like Velcro. Whereas anything that is positive, be it a thought, a feeling, an emotion, a perception, a belief system, a memory or an experience, gets washed off like as though it is that non-stick material that we use, the Teflon material. Because of this bias, there is accumulation of many of the negative thoughts within our mind, what we call them as automatic negative thoughts. As you can see, an ant is an acronym. Even though in the picture that you see the same type of ant repeated again, either in nature or in our mind, actually, there are many different types of negative thoughts. Just like there are many different types of ants, be it a red ant, black ant, a termite, a fire ant. In a similar manner, we have many different types of negative thoughts in our mind. I'm not going to go into any of those details except to mention just a couple, because equivalent to the termite in the nature, our blaming, defending, and comparing are the three worst automatic negative thought. They are like termite population in our mind. So we need to watch out for that. So what happens with these ants? So from now on, I'm going to refer these automatic negative thoughts as their ants. These are automatic. We don't need to put any effort. They come spontaneously, automatically. We will go deeper tomorrow into where these ants are coming from, which type of mind do they come from, which part of the brain these ants come from. We will go into a little bit deeper tomorrow. But today, let us look into how these ants affect our lives. When these ants, just like in nature, you hardly see a stray ant, right? Either when now summer is around the corner, when we go out for picnics, we see ants coming in groups. Or at home, we see ants one behind the other coming in a straight line, as you know. So when these ants go unchecked in our mind, the automatic negative thoughts go unchecked in our mind, very similar to real ants. They come one after another. What happens? These unchecked ants will affect our relationships. The unchecked ants will affect our work, what we are doing. These unchecked ants will affect our health. And these unchecked ants will affect our learning. And these unchecked ants will make us be in a fixed state of mind. These unchecked ants will prevent us to have a growth mindset. And these unchecked ants will affect our entire life itself when they go unnoticed and unchecked. So it's really imperative for us to be able to recognize these negative thoughts, so that self-awareness, which is the most important quality of a human being, and the self-awareness is what distinguishes us humans from the rest of the animals. Through self-awareness, we need to recognize these ants and change them. And going a bit deeper, what happens when these unchecked, unnoticed ants become a few too many to handle? As such, as you know, in Sanskrit saying, our mind actually acts like a pendulum, right? And with these unchecked, unnoticed ants going haywire, our mind goes back and forth like a pendulum between past and future, looking at past with regret. I should have done this. I should not have done that. all the should have and should not have statements. Whenever we get that, we can see we are looking at the past with regret. And we are looking at the future with lot more anxiety and pessimism. And whatever is happening in the present moment, we are never satisfied. We know we are grateful for everything what we have. 20 years back, 30 years back, 40 years back, some of us have come close to 50 years back to this country. We have moved on. We have everything what we dreamt and much more. But yet the present moment is unsatisfactory or not as content. So whenever we look at the present moment, somehow or other, we are able to, let us say, put our mind in the present moment, here and now and here, it becomes unsatisfactory and discontent present state of mind. In other words, these ants prevent us to be in the present moment, here and now and here. This is the most important concept and slide. If we need to understand mindfulness and what is the contribution of meditation, and we at Yogakshema has come up with a definition of mindfulness, not just mindfulness in general for meditation, and right away we will know why this understanding of this concept is so crucial. Not only understanding, and accepting is even more crucial. So this is so important. I'm just going to take the next 30 seconds to wait and see if somebody has any doubt regarding this. I'm just going to make this statement one more time, and that will give you time either to raise your hand or to, if you have any doubts, to put it in the chat box. These automatic negative thoughts and prevent us to be in the present moment, here and now and here. I'll just go a step further, explain this, why it is so important before taking the questions. When we just scratch the surface of what I have said, think about this. Both past and future are our mental constructs. There is nothing like past. There is nothing like future. What I'm trying to say is, in terms of doing, in terms of action, all the actions, all the doing, all the being happens only in the present moment. At the thought level, we have past. At the thought level, we have future. They are the mental constructs. Very important. Past, we need to learn from the past. Past is important. Future is important. We need to plan for the future. I'm not talking at that level. But because of the negativity bias that we have, and because of the accumulation of many of the negative thoughts within us, because they come one after another, whenever we think about the past and future, it is always with anxiety and regret, and not as a hopeful way of looking at the future. And the present at that time is very unsatisfactory. However, whatever we can do, the action, our behavior, our actions, our doing, quote unquote doing, can only happen in the present moment. And whenever it is happening, it is only the present moment. This is another aspect that is so close to our Upanishad scriptures. This is the scientific way of explaining that. Just think about it. And we want to be convinced about this concept before we can go further. If there are any questions, Rama, we can take it. Otherwise, I'll move on. We will take a few more seconds.
Usha, this is Sugandhi. I earlier asked you a question about, the dissecting versus putting together, spirituality versus science. So
Okay.
in that same regard here, I mean, the detachment aspects, right? Is that what we are trying to achieve when we say here and now and here?
Yeah.
Stay detached and just do it.
Yeah. Sugandhi, I thought it was Rama. Your voice sounded like Rama. I just thought the earlier question was from Rama, but from you. Sugandhi, yes, detachment, but that detachment has to be the result of something. If we hone in on detachment, and this is where for all of us, even for me, it has taken me years and years to really go deep and understand. We're going to make a case by the third day, you will see. I'm going to hold on to that because I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Yes, this detachment has to ensue. But we are focusing on the detachment. It is something very similar to, the very first statement I did, I started the presentation about making the journey as destination. We all know how journey is more important than the destination, right? But now we would say that as how would I say, as a literary phrase or an esoteric concept, and it felt good and it makes sense. Yes, of course. But we now have neuroscientific evidence for that statement. But I'm not going to go detail into the neuroscience evidence because it is still quite recent that is coming up. And this is the research that is done in Prague, that is published in European Journal of Applied, I think it is Physiology, if I'm correct. But what I'm trying to say is, even such statements, journey is more important than destination. Now we have neuroscience evidence connecting to the dopaminergic system about pain, pleasure, balancing it out. So what I'm trying to come back and tell you is, we will take this up on the third day. Yes, detachment is very important, but that has to be the result of something. What is that something? We will wait and see. It is just like, when I gave a talk for IIT Kanpur students and faculty, we know all of this, but yet we are in the pursuit of happiness, right? Whenever we pursue happiness, it is so hard to get. Happiness has to ensue. When we cannot pursue happiness, we can pursue joy, we can pursue pleasure. This is that fine line between positive psychology and our scriptural knowledge too. But even there in positive psychology, they are very, very coming close to whatever that has already been said in the scriptures. For example, this here and now, this is said in our Viveka Chudamani. And they say that mukti is not something that you get after you die. They say, they use the word in Viveka Chudamani, there is a word, Sanskrit word, saying that it is ihaiva, ihaiva. That means it is here and now and here, that mukti is here in this moment. I'm going to build this case as we go along. And what does that mean from a scientific perspective? Unless there is a question like this, I won't go too much into detail from the scriptural perspective, even though that is also my passion. But I'll stick to scientific perspective and say, what does that mean? Ihaiva, here and now. For here and now, the Sanskrit term is ihaiva. And that is one of the terms in one of the shlokas in Viveka Chudamani, which is an introductory text, as we all know, Prakarana Grantha, they say, for the Upanishads. The Viveka Chudamani is an introductory text to study Upanishad. In that it says, ihaiva, the mukti is ihaiva. And so close.
Thanks, Usha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, ma'am. I had a question. This is Aarti.
Yes.
So, ma'am, great reference to anxiety and negative thoughts as termites and ants. And I'm not sure if, in the upcoming days, you'll be talking about how does one takes those steps to get rid of those ants and termites, small steps, long steps, like long term. So that would be great if, you could throw some light on that.
Absolutely, we will take it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Usha, there's one question.
Yes, Ramaa.
Is mindfulness training a part of teachers' training curriculum in India?
No. As far as I know, not yet. That is what we are trying to bring this in. Wherever I go, forget about part of the curriculum. Maybe it might be in some of the international schools, or maybe in some alternate schools. Yes, they are, like, for example, our own faculty of Yogakshema, his daughter went to one of the schools, alternate school, and mindfulness was part of it, which is very few and far in between. Forget about being a part of the curriculum. Wherever I go and speak to the educators, whether they are 30 or 3,000, when I go, I tell them, at least start using the word, be mindful, rather than focus. Be mindful. That itself has so much of an effect. I will get to that on the third day when I speak about mindfulness. But as far as I know, it is not there. We are trying, at least I have no idea how to go about. More than trying, our hope, wish, and prayers is to bring this up to the mainstream. And now we are getting opportunities. As a matter of fact, I'm going back to India in November because we have a program through Yogakshema to train some of the teachers in Baroda. For teachers, to train the teachers, to bring this mind training concept for the students. And you will know why again tomorrow when I go deeper into mind and brain, different parts of the brain, the functioning. If the teachers can get to know, irrespective of their subject, and how profound and powerful it will be, this information for the teachers to be able to convey it to the students. And otherwise, I always try to compare, in a sense, in a good way. I'm saying, I evaluate myself and say, as an adult, I had to learn so much how to manage my emotions, because We have been told since childhood days, you always have to have good thoughts in your mind, never negative thoughts, never thought of never think about jealousy, never think about comparing with others, none of that. Always sadbhavane, sad alochane is what we have been said. But we don't know how. We go to teachers, pay so much to get trained for dance, for music, for doing yoga, even to learn to breathe. We pay and go to special teachers, you know. But yet none of us have been taught how to think our thoughts. And what are those feelings? Why those feelings are so strong? None of us have been taught. And this is what for the past at least 10 years, anywhere I go, this is what I'm honing in. And I'm always hopeful and I'm always optimistic. Sometime or other, it may not be through Yogakshema, it does not matter who brings this up. This has to be, may not be as a curriculum, but each and every teacher has to have a common understanding, more than common, some basic understanding about mind and brain, so that they can understand themselves, about their own behavior towards the students and their families and friends, so that they can impart right from childhood days for their students. And things would be so much more beautiful, to be honest with you. The world can be a much more beautiful place if all of us learn about our own mind and brain to begin with. Again, thanks for that question. Great questions. I always say, whatever I share, you know, the joy comes out because of the questions that have been asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. I
Okay.
think this has been a wonderful, and you know, so I think we would also be at around 7:45. Maybe we can continue tomorrow to do this. So
sure, we will have 10 more minutes, but we'll continue this tomorrow, Rama, before I go further. Absolutely. This is a very good place to stop and reflect upon this.
Yeah, there is a lot of things I think that you have shared, that a lot of it for us to absorb also. Sure. Yes. And to come back maybe with new questions for you as we start the session tomorrow. Right?
Certainly.
So with this, I'm going to stop the recording.
Sure.
Great talk, Usha. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.